Perfect.
Yeah, you're on.
Our next speakers are Scott McQueen and Jordee Reid, who are, Scott is a longtime dog musher from the Yellowknife area. Scott, I'm going to have you introduce yourself properly. But both Scott and Jordee have been incredible partners in the delivery of our veterinary education, where when we've gone up north and had our students interacting with communities and working in the Sawtoo, and Scott and Jordee have provided just amazing introductions to the north and to northern dogs and the importance of dogs to the community and the culture. And so it's really it's a real honor to have you guys here to speak today. We're excited to hear what you've got to say, and please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is a little bit new to us, presenting on Zoom. So just bear with us if there's any technical glitches on our end. We want to run our presentation to be, we'll speak for about an hour. And as we're talking, if you have any questions that come up, just write them in the chat, and then we're going to save 15 minutes at the end, and we're going to go through the chat and we'll answer any questions that way. I think that will work best for everyone. So I'm going to share my screen because we do have a bit of a presentation, but it's mainly images so that everyone can see what we're talking about, because some people might not be might not know what dog mushing is all about.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott McQueen. I'm here with my daughter, Jordee Reid. We're presenting from Yellowknife, Northwest Territories, and we've been asked to talk about growing up in the North with sled dogs as a central part of our life. My family has owned sled dogs my whole life, and life with dogs has always been a part of my children's lives as well. And now it's filtering down into my grandchildren who are learning how to work with sled dogs. When my son Tolson was young, I was telling someone a story about how my dad and I have had sled dogs our whole lives. And afterwards, Tolson was a young boy. He was about 4 or 5, and he says to me, "Dad, I'll have sled dogs my whole life too, and I'll make sure that my sons or my kids have sled dogs their whole lives as well." And that comment just kind of goes to show how important and how integral sled dogs are to the lives of Northern Indigenous people. For me, training sled dogs was critical to enjoying a healthy, happy life in the North. Even as a small child growing up in a log cabin on the Tolson River, I realized that everything we needed for survival was provided by our sled dogs. My dad would set fish nets in the lakes and rivers, and the dogs would haul the fish home to our cabin. The dogs would also haul home the meat that my dad harvested: buffalo, moose, caribou, as well as all of the wood that we needed to stay warm in the harsh northern climate was hauled to our cabin by sled dogs. Some members of my family were some of the best people in the North at training sled dogs. Trappers like my dad, Danny McQueen, and my uncles, Grant Beck Sr. and Ray Beck, trained many incredible dog teams that they were very proud of. Most Northern people took a lot of pride in the quality of their dog teams and the dog sledding equipment they owned. Because Northern people took such great pride in the quality of the dogs they owned and their abilities to travel in the wintertime, an organization in Yellowknife decided to hold a formal race to see who had the best dog team. They called the race the Canadian Championship Dog Derby. The Yellowknife Fish and Game Association in 1955 decided to hold a formal race to see who had the best dog team around Yellowknife and Great Slave Lake. The first year of the race was very popular, but the prizes were just local donations from stores. Weaver and DeVore donated a bag of flour. Yellowknife Hardware donated some rifle shells. But in 1956, the organizers of the race wanted to, the newspaper article said they wanted to make the Canadian Championship Dog Derby a race of Canadian significance. They wanted to attract dog teams from the Arctic coast around Inuvik and Tuktoyaktuk. They wanted to bring dog teams up from the dog sledding hotbed of Fort Chipewyan, Alberta, Fort Simpson, Northwest Territories. They wanted to attract all of the best dog teams from Northern Canada to compete and see who had the best dogs. In 1956, my uncle Ray Beck traveled to Yellowknife to compete in the race. The first year he competed, he came in third. And then from 1957 to 1962, my uncle Ray won the race each year, except in 1961, he narrowly lost out to a trapper from Deda, a local indigenous community near Yellowknife named Joe Toby. My uncle Ray Beck came in second that year, 1961. But in 1962, while my uncle Ray was racing in Yellowknife, my dad, Danny McQueen, was back on the Tolson River, and he was training a new dog team. Every few years, maybe about 7-8 years, the trapper would have to train a new dog team to use to travel.
This is Danny McQueen.
Here's a photo of my dad, Danny McQueen, racing in the Canadian Championship Dog Derby with his dog team. Sandy on lead, Dempsey next to lead, Tony, the only female in the team, running third, Speed, a big, fierce black dog, fourth. And what was really common in the North before was sharing and helping each other. And so the fifth dog in the team is a dog called Ace, and that belonged to my uncle Jim Bolio. And then the last dog on wheel is a dog called Coco, and that belonged to my uncle Grant Beck Sr. They loaned their best dogs to my dad to aid him in the dog derby, because everybody had a lot of pride, and winning the dog derby meant a lot to Northern people. So when my dad was training this young dog team, what was really common is a lot of the trappers would go out hunting together. And you might have 10, 12 dog teams all traveling in one big line for a community hunt. And so in 1962, my dad, my uncle Ray, and a number of the other Tolson River hunters went hunting for caribou. And right away, my uncle Ray would go right to the front of the line, a breaking trail it was called. Was a big honor for Northern people to be at the front of all of these dog teams with your dog team breaking trail. And so what they would do is they would have informal races, like they would talk about where they're going to have a tea camp, and at midday at lunch, and have a lunch there, give the dogs a rest and a snack. And so each dog team would try to get to the tea camp first, each trapper. And if you got there first, you use your snowshoe, you clear the soft snow, you make a fire, you fill your tea pail full of snow, you put that on the fire, let that melt and boil, and hopefully you're sitting there with a hot cup of tea steaming in your cup when the next dog team comes, and that's the biggest insult you can have for the other dogs. You're showing them, wow, my dog team's so fast, I'm already sitting here, I've made fire, I've made tea, even thinking about having a little nap waiting for the other teams to catch up. And so that's what happened in 1962. My uncle Ray took off. He thought he was going to leave everybody behind, but my dad and this young dog team in the picture, they stuck right with him, right behind Ray's championship dog team. And all the way to tea camp, where they planned on making tea camp. And so together, my dad, my uncle Ray, they cleared the snow, they made tea, and they were sitting there drinking their hot tea when the other teams started to arrive. And my dad started to realize what an amazing young dog team he had. After they had their rest, they left again, and my dad said the snow was so deep it was up to the dogs' chests. And after a while, Ray's championship dog team, they got tired. They couldn't run through that soft snow anymore. And so the next option after that was usually one of the trappers would put on snowshoes and walk in front of the dogs to make a trail. But nobody wanted to do that, of course. And so my dad told his brother Ray, I'll let my young dog team break trail for a while. And so he passed by, and he said they kept leaping through the snow and using their whole bodies to flatten the snow down and break trail for the other teams. And eventually they found a hard packed road, and the caribou in the Tolson River area would travel in huge herds, thousands of caribou together, and make hard packed roads. This young dog team found this caribou road in the bush, and they could smell the caribou. So the road was packed so hard, they started to run as fast as they could. Eventually they come out onto a lake, and there was the herd of caribou. They went running into the middle of the herd of caribou, and they were lunging at caribou and acting like they were a pack of wolves on a hunt. And so after that, the hunters shot the caribou they wanted. They loaded into the dog teams and they headed back to town. And as my dad was traveling back to the community of Rocha River where we grew up, he was thinking about how amazing this young dog team was, and decided that the next year, 1963, he would bring them to Yellowknife to compete in the dog derby against his brother Ray. And so he did that. 1963, he arrived in Yellowknife, and the first day of the dog derby was really close between my Uncle Ray, my dad, and a guy from Deda named Isidore Sangri. And by the last day of the dog derby, my dad and Isidore had left everybody else behind, even my Uncle Ray and his championship dog team. And the way the race worked is they would go 40 kilometers out onto Great Slave Lake, circle around, and then race back to town, and race back to Yellowknife. And so on the last day of the 1963 dog derby, they did that. All the teams, my dad and Isidore both circled out on Great Slave Lake and started heading back to Yellowknife side by side. My dad said Isidore looked over at him and said, "Here we are, Danny, halfway, and I'm right next to you." My dad said, "Yeah, not for long though." And he used to make a sound, and was so popular with us kids because he would go "sk, sk," and that meant there was an animal around. And that signal, that sound to his dogs made them break out into a full out run. And that's what he did in that dog derby race. He started making that noise. His dogs thought there was an animal around, so they started running as fast as they can in full chase. After he left Isidore behind, he stopped making that sound, and the dogs thought, oh, that animal must have got away. So they settled into a more leisurely pace. And my dad went on to win the 1963 Canadian Championship Dog Derby. He came back again in 1964 and competed in the dog derby, winning the 1964 dog derby as well. The interesting story on that one was after the dog derby was done, usually the dog teams would travel along the lake shore of Great Slave Lake for safety reasons. But in 1964, my dad decided to cross straight across the middle of Great Slave Lake by dog team to head home, taking a 2-day trip and making into one long day. And he had a young boy, my cousin, Richard Beck, was traveling with him. And they left a beautiful sunny day in Yellowknife. And once they traveled for a few hours, the wind started to pick up on Great Slave Lake. And before long, they were in the middle of a whiteout storm. They couldn't see anything around them. My dad let Sandy and the dogs travel through that storm for quite a while, stopping often to check on Richard, who was only about 12 years old at the time, traveling with his own dogs behind my dad. Richard was getting really scared and nervous that Sandy had gotten lost and turned into the middle of the lake, a fatal and life-causing decision that would be. So after a while, my dad started to think, we should have arrived at the shore by now. Maybe Sandy did get lost. Maybe he lost his way here. And so he stopped the dogs. He stopped Richard's dogs, and they tied the dog teams in a circle. And they slept there on the edge of Great Slave Lake that night in the storm. They both climbed into their toboggans. My dad covered Richard over completely with his feather blanket. He climbed into his toboggan, did the same thing, covered himself with the feather blanket. The dog slept next to the toboggan in the snow. And early in the morning, my dad said he opened up his feather blankets, and there, about 200 yards in front of him, were the trees that Sandy was heading for. If he would have let his dog team travel for another 15 minutes, they would have got to the trees. My dad would have realized Sandy is going in the exact right direction that he needs to go to get to the south side of Great Slave Lake, even through a whiteout storm like that. So it was my dad started to realize how amazing this dog team was that he was traveling with. 1965, he came back to race in the dog derby, and once these sled dogs have done something a couple of times, it's recorded in their memories. That they know every detail about it. And my dad's dogs knew every detail about the Canadian Championship Dog Derby, to the point where by 1966, when my dad won the 1965 Dog Derby and came back in '66, the dog team completed the 50-mile, 80-kilometer distance in 3 hours and 50 minutes. Most teams at that time were taking over 5 hours to complete the 80-kilometer trip. My dad cut at least an hour off that time with his dogs, and so people started to believe that they weren't just regular dogs. They had special powers, especially the indigenous people. They believed that Sandy had a Wolverine, was bred partly to Wolverine and had Wolverine spirit in him. That's why he was so tough and smart. And so my dad, on one of the days of the race, he put his other lead dog Dempsey on lead, just to show that all of his dogs were amazing, not just Sandy. And so by 1967, my dad was coming back for his 5th Canadian Championship Dog Derby. There was very little competition at that time because my dad, my Uncle Ray, had been so dominating over the years of the Dog Derby that very few competitors traveled to Yellowknife to compete against them. And in 1967, actually there was one situation in 1967 is the Fort Smith racer who was employed by the government of the Northwest Territories wanted to make a big push to beat my dad, because every year he was coming 2nd, 3rd in the Dog Derby. Jordee Mason wanted to, and the government of the Northwest Territories as well, all of their fish and game officers traveled by dog team, and Jordee would take the best of all those dog teams and he would put them together and race against these trappers. It was a little embarrassing for the government. You know, they had 100 dogs at least to pick from, and these trappers in the bush with 4 or 5 dogs were coming into Yellowknife and beating them on a regular basis. And so Jordee wanted to make a big push that year, 1967, to beat my dad. But my dad borrowed my Uncle Ray's best dogs and easily won. The last day of the Dog Derby, he put his feather blanket into his toboggan, and he just rode around inside and enjoyed the last day of the race. Unfortunately, that was the end of the Canadian Championship Dog Derby as well, because times were changing, and people were switching from dog teams to automobiles or snowmobiles, and so the format of the Canadian Championship Dog Derby changed from an 80-kilometer out and back race to a series of circles, and the trapline dogs didn't like going around and round in circles. They knew their sense of direction. When they went out and came back to their original location, to them the trip was done, and so it's really odd for them to have to continue to go around and around the same trail for no obvious reason. But the dogs that my uncles used were so amazing that they did certain things. Actually,
Did you miss that story?
I missed one story here, and it's from the 1963 Canadian Championship Dog Derby. See, the prize of the 1963 Canadian Championship Dog Derby not only included 500 Canadian dollars, it included a special trip that was organized by the Yellowknife Fish and Game Association. And that was a trip for my dad, his family, and his dog team to travel to the 1963 Canadian Calgary Stampede as a celebrity guest. And we have a photo of my dad in the Calgary Stampede parade with his dog team, his harnesses, his big winter parka in the July heat of Calgary. And they also did some demonstrations on the Stampede grounds with the dog team, and my dad commanding them around barrels. But when the family first arrived in Calgary, they dropped our family off at a downtown hotel, And then they took the dogs to where they were going to be staying for the weekend. We were in Calgary. And that evening, they picked up my dad to feed his dogs. The organizers, Stu DeMelt and Smokey Heel. And they drove him through the city to where his dogs were being housed. They drove right to the Calgary Zoo. And in a cage in the Calgary Zoo was my dad's dog team, his toboggan, his harnesses. And in the very next cage was the cage with the lions. My dad said those lions kept circling around next to his dogs and roaring at them. And I asked, what did your dogs do in return? And he said, they roared right back. The hair was up in the back of their necks and they were ready to tackle some of the biggest lynx they'd ever seen. And so through these travels, through this racing, my dad realized that the sled dogs could do amazing things, and it was you just had to allow them the opportunity to think and to learn, and they would amaze you with their knowledge. And it came to a point with my dad and traveling around that the dog team took over some decision making. Like when Sandy was traveling on ice in the springtime or the fall time, my dad wouldn't stop and take his axe and check and cut a hole in the ice to see how thick it was. He watched Sandy's reaction. If Sandy put his ears down and listened carefully, that was the signal that the ice under his feet was getting thin and you had to head to shore. And sometimes if you encountered, like my dad on Great Slave Lake encountering a whiteout storm, what the trapper would do is he would just climb into his toboggan and he would cover over and let the dog team take him through the storm. And my dad said every time that the toboggan would stop moving, he knew that he would be back at his cabin, back in town, because the dogs weren't going to stop until they got back. And they always had this amazing sense of direction that they could take him right back to where they needed to go. They learned so many different things about traveling and the conditions, sometimes my uncles, my dad would say, you know, the conditions are so bad you can't even look into the storm. Your eyes would start freezing shut. And you just put your head down, you cover up, and you depend on your dog team to keep you safe through your travels. And not all dogs were equal, of course. Some dog teams were better than others. Some dogs were more amazing than others. You know, there was stories of trappers being found with their dog teams floating in rivers with their toboggans and everything intact because the dogs made the wrong judgments on ice calls. But with my family, they work so much with the dogs, and the dogs became just such an amazing part of their lives that it's become so ingrained in my way of thinking, and I guess I've kind of instilled that into my children and now my grandchildren. And so that's a bit of that's a historical look at dog sledding, how people use dogs for survival, for travel on the land. But now around the late 1960s, early 1970s, dogs really transitioned from a way of life, from travel. And like I said, the means of transportation switched to automobile, snowmobile, but people still, like my family, working with dogs was so ingrained that they couldn't give it up. It was too important of a part of their lives. And so we've kind of handed the torch to our children. And now for a more modern perspective on dog sledding, I'll pass things over to my daughter, Jordee Reid.
So that historical look on dog sledding really shows the valuable relationship that Indigenous and Northern people have with sled dogs. And it's really interwoven into Canadian culture. You know, everyone used to travel by dog team. That was essentially having a vehicle in that time. You know, the RCMP, industry, government, like my dad said, everyone used dog teams to travel at that time. And then when that switch happened where vehicles and snowmobiles became more prevalent in everyday life, there was still this intense relationship that people had with these dogs from working so closely with them for so long and having them become part of their family. You know, they couldn't just give them up like that. And that's where the transition to racing, sled dog racing, really took foot, was around that time in the 70s and 80s, where these people that have for generations have worked so closely with dogs, they all of a sudden, you know, just because traveling by skidoo or vehicle was easier, and so they would do that, but they wanted to keep dogs in their lives. And so that's where these people now transitioned into racing and have taught their children, the next generation, about racing. And that's kind of this new modern dog mushing and where it is now. But it all stems from that relationship for generations that people have had with these dogs. But the dog sledding and its significance within the Canadian culture has long been overlooked. And I think that's partly the fault of dog mushers. Dog mushers are notorious for staying in the shadows and just, you know, working with their dogs, and that's what they do. And I think that's really why I'm here and my dad's here giving these kind of presentations, is to kind of like lift that veil of mystery, because lately there's been quite a bit of controversy with the sport of dog mushing. And I think a lot of that stems from people just not knowing what it's about, not knowing what dog mushers do, what dog sledding is. And it's important. It's important to keep dog mushing alive because it is a part of Canadian culture. And for that point, North American culture, I mean, Alaska, Northern US, sled dogs were used there as well. And so for our family, you know, we kept into dog mushing because it was a way to keep sled dogs in our lives. It was a way to remember our ancestors, to keep that traditional activity alive. So for me growing up, this is a picture of me training for the Canadian Championship Dog Derby that I ran when I was 18 years old, in 2005, in memory of my grandfather. But I first stepped foot on a sled, a dog sled, at 3 years old. Actually, my twin boys beat me last year. They were 2 years old, and the video I showed at the beginning of this presentation was them on their first first time taking a team out, one dog. Yeah, so they beat me by a year. I grew up around the sled dogs. I grew up sleeping in houses with puppies. I grew up, well, actually, I grew up with Dr. Michelle Tuma as well. We used to play sled dog. Her favorite dog was Fly, and so she would pretend to be Fly, and my favorite dog was 50, and so I would tend to be 50, and we would play pretend sled dogs. That was my childhood. We both actually grew up wanting to be veterinarians, and Michelle actually made it happen, which is pretty incredible. And it just became a huge part of my identity. Being a dog musher is just so ingrained in who I am. But life as a dog musher, as I said, is unknown, which I think is part of the problem why people think dog sledding is wrong. And so I want to walk you guys through kind of a year in the life of a modern dog musher, and just kind of what we're all about, what we do, what each season brings for us. And so spring, summer, I'll start there. That is puppy season and breeding dogs. So we often breed our own dogs. This is a litter of puppies we had this past summer.
And they're puppies that were just born.
Ruby, they're just a day old.
As far as I can see, there are 4 of them. Ruby. Line up. There they are. Squished a little bit. There they are. For them. Proud.
And puppy season, so breeding our own dogs is a way for us to be able to take the traits and characteristics of the type of dog that we want, like the look, the way that they perform, even things down to the length of their fur, because up here we want dogs with a bit better of a coat. All of those things are what you look for when you breed your dogs, and it's kind of like this. It takes years to get to this point where you get the dog that you want, and there's quite a bit of thought and research and I guess science that goes into that as well. And this is something that all dog mushers do, is breed their own dogs. And then the sale of dogs and puppies is a large part of the dog mushing community too. And so if you're able to breed these incredible sled dogs, and then you're then able to turn around and sell them for thousands of dollars, that's another way to generate income, to basically fund your racing. No dog musher becomes rich. It's everything goes back into the dogs. And so with the puppies, that's where we start training our dogs. So it's right from the beginning. So we leave the mom about a week or so alone with the puppies, just checking on them and just to give her time with them. And then from there, when they're small like that, we pick up the puppies, we hold them on their backs, try and touch their bellies, trying to bring that human touch early so that these puppies feel really comfortable with humans and safe, and when they're really vulnerable on their back, that nothing happens to them, and it's okay, that creates that right away, that connection between the human and animal. And then from there, we bring the puppies onto the grass like this, and this is my little boy Rosher last year. We just touch them and let them play and interact with them, and like kids, we let them have fun, but always with the human, like always keeping that connection.
Oh, you want more puppies? Okay, here. What about this pup?
And just always with like gentle and safe and working with these dogs right from a really young age. From there, we run and chase with the dogs. So they learn to chase after us, run around. This is really to get their body moving. To get their body moving, to get their learn how to really stretch out, run, their coordination. Puppies are kind of like, at this age and a little bit older, they're kind of like teenagers, like they're a little bit gangly, their bodies are growing fast, and they're uncoordinated still. And so giving them these opportunities to just run in a really fun kind of way, but it also teaches them how to run well, and just giving them all those opportunities. And then from there, we get them to chase, and I don't have a video, I apologize. We get them to chase a motorized vehicle. So depending on the season, it's a quad or a snowmobile, because at some point, quite early on in the puppy's years, they get too fast to chase a human. And so then we need to rely on something with a motor in order to really get them to learn how to run at speeds, because that's what you want out of a sled dog, is for them to be able to run for a long period of time at fast a pace as they can. And that takes practice. And so you want to start early with that practice. And so that's spring and summer for a dog musher, is often raising puppies. And then when we move into fall, that's when we start training before the snow and ice hit. We start training.
August 17th, first run of the year. On our way home. All right, boys, let's go.
This is me a couple years ago with Rosher, one of my boys. So we train them, we try to start as early in the season as possible, training the dogs with a quad because there's no snow yet, so we can't use our sleds. And we start them at 4 miles, 6 kilometers? 6 kilometers. Dog mushers work in miles. I don't know the conversions very well. And with the quad, they learn how to pull. So they are pulling that quad without it being on, just to build the muscles, so that later on they get the endurance piece. So right now it's like muscle building at the beginning of the season, and from here they also learn how to interact with a lot of different things. So when we run them on the roads, they learn how to pass by vehicles, how to deal with different noises. And those are all really important pieces of training sled dogs in the modern world, because when they're in races, they encounter all these different things. I mean, you hear of dog mushers, they have to go through like culverts in certain races because that's just the way the trail is, or even like some races in Alaska, they're dealing with like moose on the trail. So you have to take whatever's thrown at you, and you need to train your dogs to be able to do the same. This was a video of our little family just a couple days ago with our training run. It's really, for us, it's a family affair. You know, we try to incorporate everyone, even the little ones, into this, because it's all about it's all about family. Like, the dogs are our family, so we include the whole family as well when we're working with them. It's truly like an intergenerational activity, a lifestyle for sure. And then, so I actually put this slide in here to talk about how we keep our dogs. So they live in these dog lots. They live outdoors year round. They have these dog houses that are fully insulated, top, bottom, all the sides, and they're quite small because the sled dogs curl up to sleep, and with a small door for them to fit through. So in the winter, they go inside their houses, they curl up, and their body heats up that small space, and then the insulated sides and walls and keeps that heat in there. And I mean, I can attest to that because I used to sleep in these dog houses as a kid, so it actually gets and stays quite warm in there. And then we tether our dogs in this kind of way, and I just want to take a minute to describe why, because it is a little bit controversial with some people, the tethers. For us, we choose this way over keeping our dogs in pens, because often when they're penned, they are either alone or with another dog, and there can be fights and arguments that happen with that. Dogs are really social, so they need to be able to socialize with other dogs. And the way that we have our tethers is that they can reach certain dogs to be able to socialize and play with them, but they can also retreat away. So when they're in a pen, they don't get that option. So if something happens that they want to escape from, they're kind of trapped in that area. Whereas with the tethers, they can still play with dogs close to them, but they can choose to not as well. And so that gives them that choice that they have. So I think just opening up that conversation of tethers is a really important thing, because I know it's an issue for some activists against sled dogs. That's Bella. I just love that picture. So our dogs are very vocal, very happy animals. Oh yeah, so the other part of living with sled dogs is just all of the chores that you have to do. So it's a hell of a lot of work. So many hours are put into it. A big chore is dog poop. That, like, our life is poop a lot of the time. My uncle jokes that owning sled dogs is the fastest way to turn money into shit. And it's like 100% true and very literal. The other part is feeding. So we feed our dogs once a day. We give them their meal, and then in the morning, so the meal's in the late afternoon, early evening. The morning we give them baited water. We feed our dogs a mixture of raw meat, fat, and high quality kibble. The meat that we feed them is a mixture of beef and chicken, all ground up, and we make it into this really soupy mixture with warm water. Especially in the wintertime, the warm water is important because it makes it so that the bowls warm up and their tongues don't get stuck to the metal bowls. The kibble that a lot of dog mushers use is red paw. That's one of the most popular ones at the moment. And fat, so fat, beef fat especially, is an essential part of the dog's diet. We adjust the fat content based on how much they're working, the temperature outside. So if it's colder, we add more fat to their diet so that their bodies are able to heat themselves and still stay fueled. Yeah, so fat is the most important piece of their diet that we utilize. And for us, we often just get our beef fat from the grocery store, from the butcher, and we grind it ourselves. This is a block of chicken. We get them in this form, and we get it from southern locations. That's actually a big part of fall as well, is our trip down south for northern dog mushers. Is we do a supply run once a year where we get our beef in this sort of form. This right here is chicken, a block of chicken, all frozen like this. We get straw, because that's what's in the dog houses, is a bed of straw that they sleep on. And that's also what we adjust in the winters. We give them more straw on the colder nights. Not that we take it away, but we always add more straw when it gets colder, making sure that they have a really nice warm bed of straw to sleep on. But this is part of prepping the food for us, is chopping frozen chicken day in, day out. This is a long video of us chopping chicken. I just wanted to show it, like, how much work. And then it's thawed. So we take this inside, we thaw it out, and then we add it into that soupy mixture that you saw.
Yeah, so I want people to think we're feeding rock hard
No,
chicken.
yeah. And so winter brings more training. So the sled dogs are moved onto the ice. Once the ice freezes, the training moves onto the ice. Once the ice freezes, then we start running on the lakes and with our sleds. So this is a little video of us getting the dogs ready and bringing them. So this is where they live, the dog lot, and we bring them from the dog lot to the stakeout chain, where we get them prepped to run them. That big furry dog in there is not a sled dog, that's our house dog. Yeah, so when you start running on the lakes and it allows us to run further distances because it just expands the area that we're able to run. So we have a network of trails in Yellowknife. Every dog musher has that. That we follow. And so we go from the 4 miles in the fall and we bump it up to 8 miles. And then once we can hit the lakes, then we bump it up to 10 miles, 14 miles. And we just keep increasing the distance as the dogs are comfortable with that distance. You really, when you're training dogs, you really become in tune with everything about your dogs, you know, like how they're feeling, how they think. You're almost like this exceptional coach as a dog musher working with these athletes. But the hard part about being a coach in dog mushing is that you can't speak with words to your dog. So you really get to know them intimately. That's us harnessing a dog. If you've never seen it before, that's the harness that we use to tie them into the lines. So this is what a modern dog team looks like. You see the difference between the historic pictures to these pictures. Dogs are tied side by side now, whereas before they were one-on-one, one in front of the other. That change there happened because previously, dogs were running through thick bush. They were having to go any which way that the person needed them to go, and so they needed to be single file so that you know, they didn't go on either side of a tree and get stuck like that. It gave them more space to maneuver. But as dog mushing became modernized, people started keeping more dogs, started training more dogs, started racing with more dogs. And so to have them single file, you would have like you couldn't see the front of your team if they were single file. So dog mushing had to evolve to have setups where they're tandem hitch, it's called. So they're side by side like this. Just a description on the change that was made. This is a little this is my husband running dogs. Running dogs for me is the most peaceful place that you'll ever be. There's no motor. You're still moving at these speeds. You're in like beautiful natural landscapes. And so to be a dog musher, you need to have that kind of mentality, because as you start training further and further distances, you're on these training runs for 2-3 hours at a time. And so you're out there with your dogs for these extended periods of time. Every winter, you know, a couple times a week. It's a lot of time, a big time commitment that dog mushers make, and they do it because of many reasons, but one big reason is this peace that dog mushers feel when they're out on the trail. And like, you know, you get beautiful views like this of the sundog in Yellowknife, and this connection that people feel. It's like, it's with the natural landscape. It's a connection with your ancestors. It's a connection with animals. It's just like, it's incredible to feel so connected by doing this one activity. It's hard to describe. I think I'm trying, but I don't know if I'm actually succeeding. Oh, here's another video of a training run that we had. Oh yeah, I included this video too, to show the pink jacket, the blue one too, that we put on the dogs. That's when it gets colder than about minus 30 is when we start to jacket our dogs on long training runs. A lot of it is the males need their bits covered because it's too exposed, and some dogs have not as much fur on their their stomachs, so they need a jacket to cover those parts. Those are the main reasons why we will put jackets on our dogs when we're training them, or when they're racing too. So another big part of dog mushers is the racing circuit. So a lot of dog mushers travel every winter across North America to race, and they do so using a truck and a dog box. So on the back there is our dog box that we have, where the dogs live in there for months on end. Like it depends on the dog musher, but some dog mushers travel with their dogs for like 2-3 months at a time, driving from race to race. And a big part of living or of traveling with dogs is, we call it dropping dogs. So it's essentially this. So every 4 hours, you stop somewhere and you let your dogs loose, and to pee, poop, stretch, play. And that's the cycle of traveling with sled dogs. So you have them in the box every 4 hours, you let them out for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And that's the cycle that you make. It's a little bit different after they eat. You let them out after 2 hours because their stomachs are full and they need to evacuate that. And then overnight they sleep for 8 hours. And that's kind of the schedule that you follow. So it's a lot of work traveling with dogs. It's actually really cool though, the way the dogs learn their truck. They stay really close to it. And you even have at races, dog mushers lined up like not that far away from each other, and all the dogs know their own truck and they stay around, and it's not like chaos. It's actually quite organized and controlled. It's a really cool thing to see. Yeah, here's us dropping dogs on one of our travels, McQueen Reid Racing Kennels. Yeah, that's our, in the bottom there, we store all of our food and equipment for when we travel. Yeah, so I put that in there. The racing piece of dog sledding actually has evolved into quite, like I called sled dogs athletes before. They truly are. Like, they are these incredible athletes that can do amazing things. And as the dog musher or the coach, you help them through that. You facilitate that. But they're the feats that they're able to accomplish are incredible. So part of dog care when you're racing is massaging muscles after races. We stretch our dogs before races as well. This is a picture of a dog musher stretching his dogs. This is during the Canadian Championship Dog Derby at the beginning of the race. We really care a lot about the dog's feet. There's different salves that we put in between the pads, so that mainly so that snowballs don't form in their pads, and that they're able to, so they don't get little cuts and lacerations. And if they do, so we're always checking our dog's feet. So if they do have cuts, we'll bring them inside, we'll soak their feet in water and Epsom salts, and we'll put some salve in there to try to heal that, keep them inside. If dogs have sore muscles after a race, we bring them inside again, massage. We have different salves like for muscles that we use on our sled dogs, keeping them inside to have that salve work. Yeah, dog racing is quite evolved, and there's a lot of pieces that go into it. And it's really to try to keep your athletes performing as best as they can. If any of you guys get a chance to go to a dog race, it's really incredible. All these dog mushers, they're professionals, and they're doing. This is kind of the end result of months of work that they've put in, years too, because it's not, dog mushing is not a sport that is you know, year to year. You have like a 10-year plan with your sled dogs in order to try to be the best. Like you can't just jump in, win because you've trained for a few months. It's years of work that you've put into these dogs in all conditions too. So like my dad was saying, you know, historically sled dogs worked in all conditions. It's the same thing here with modern sled dogs. The only difference is we don't rely on them to take us home. We have these groomed trails that they follow. So I mean, it's kind of like if you think of modern humans and the way we live compared to before, sled dogs are the same way. You know, like it's a bit more cushy and pampered lifestyle than it was like what, 60 years ago. And in saying all that, dog mushers really think to the future of dog mushing as well. Dog mushing is sadly slowly dying, and a lot of that is because of this lost connection with sled dogs, and like people are forgetting that that we used to have such a close connection with dogs. And so dog mushers are continuously trying to get new dog mushers involved, youth involved. Like it's a really difficult lifestyle, but it's a really incredible lifestyle as well. And I think dog mushers are continuously trying to show people that they pick people out that they think have interest in it, and there's like a lot of mentoring, informal mentoring that goes on in the dog mushing community. So if anyone is interested in dog mushing, find a dog musher that lives close to you and connect with them, because dog mushers all over North America, well, in the world, there's dog mushing in Europe as well, that they're always keen to work with people that are interested, like truly interested in learning how to be a dog musher. Because, you know, it's a traditional activity that is just, it hasn't been passed down to the next generation. And that's something that every dog musher feels, and they want to try to rectify. This is us with our little boys watching their dad hook up a team. So I guess in conclusion, I tried to showcase what a life as a dog musher was in a year. You know, it's training, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, a lot of money. So like, why do dog mushers do it? That's, I guess, the golden question. It becomes kind of this, I don't want to say addiction, but it becomes this passion that you have. And it's keeping our culture alive. It's the peace and tranquility that you get when you're out on the trail. It's the exercise that you get as well. It's very good exercise. It's this really close connection you have with an animal, which is really special, because it goes beyond having a pet. Because with a pet, you know, you're the owner, and then you have your pet. But with a working animal, you're working a lot more like as peers, I guess. So you're really having to work closely with this animal in a different kind of way, because you're having to work together. So it's a really intense connection that you have. And I'll end it there. So I guess we'll look at the chat, hey Dad, and we'll answer any questions. I'll just end my screen share.
Yeah, but stay with us there. Don't end your video.
Okay.
Okay. Jordee and Scott, thank you so much. I'm just going to quote what one of the attendees said: "What an incredibly powerful tribute to sled dogs, their families, and a vital part of Canadian culture." I've heard you guys talk many times, and every time I get something new out of it. And really, it is. I think you represent that, the dog mushing profession just incredibly well. And so thank you. There are a number of questions, so maybe I'll just read them for you. And as we go through, people, if you want to continue to ask questions, but we can go through these. And so I guess one of the first questions was, I thought sled dogs have heavy fur like huskies. These dogs don't have fur to keep them warm in the winter. And then also, in addition to that, do their kennels have flexible rubber flat doors to keep out the rain and snow?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it's actually, so our family also runs a dog sledding tour business. So we get a lot of tourists out that are like, these are sled dogs. Like, it's not really the furry Disney sled dogs that we think of. So the transition that also happened between traditional and modern dog mushing was this transition on the breed that's used. So when people started racing, they were continually trying to breed in speed into their dog as the sport evolved. And so that brought into the huskies different breeds like hounds or pointers, like hunting dogs. So that bred into them meant that they could get more speed from the dogs. But what the dogs have is this, so it might not look like a really fluffy coat that you see in huskies, but they still have that really thick underlayer on their coats. It doesn't puff out, but it is like if you were to touch a sled dog up here, you could see how thick their coat actually is. And it keeps them very warm.
And as far as the doorways of the houses, it's something that we've had a lot of discussion with as a family. If there's somebody out there that has information on rubber doorways that can be installed, please send us the information. It's the next advance we're looking at making with our housing is not so much for the rain. The rain's held out through the design of the house, but just an extra barrier to help keep the dog's heat inside the house when he's in there.
Yeah.
Really looking at, we talked about canvas, just different materials that could possibly be used and installed. And I mean, cost is always a factor. We're looking at some, a reasonably cost option as well.
Yeah, the dogs have they tear the canvas, like they like to chew. And what we do right now, just because they're still dealing with cold, is when it's right before they go to sleep, when on really cold nights, we'll give them a fresh bed of straw. And what the dogs do is they twirl, 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 so that the straw creates this nest and it almost like half covers the doorway, so that creates this block to the cold for them.
Great. Thank you. Another question about what are the ages that you start racing a dog and when do they retire? How many years can a dog, what's their career length?
Yeah. So we start to train them in dog teams. So past that, we call it free running, when they're chasing the quad and skidoo. We actually put them in the team for the first time between 6 and 8 months. And then from there, they're still in training. When they're a year, they can race. Sometimes mushers will have, when they're between a year and 2 years, we call them yearlings. Very self-explanatory. So yearlings, some yearlings are put into races to give them experience. Only exceptional ones are put into like the A team that is the competitive team. It doesn't happen very often. So often careers of sled dogs start at about 2 years old. And it really depends on the dog to what age they retire. I would say average about 6-7 years old. Hey, they'll start to retire.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Some injury might have them retire early. or like exceptional dogs as well that have just like, for some reason, these incredible bodies that keep them going. Just like people, you know, like some older people can still like do these incredible things, and it's just their body. So yeah, but average 2 years old to about 7 years old, I'd say.
For racing.
For racing, yeah. And like, that's a good point, Dad, because so from there, like, it doesn't mean that the dog is donezo. From there, people will either have a hobby team of like these retired sled dogs that they'll keep going just because like they're their dogs and they love them, so they don't race anymore. Or like our tours for our kennel, our tours are like a retirement job for the sled dogs. And some people like give away or donate their older dogs to up and coming new mushers, or people that are into like ski joring or kick sledding, because these dogs, like, they've been around the block, they're professional, they know what to do, and they're great teachers actually for new people.
Nice. There is a question about kick sledding, but I'm going to put that one on hold because there's a number of others here. So one question is there a reason dogs are fed once a day instead of more often? And I think that's a super interesting question, because those of us sitting down, you know, with our house dogs, they're getting fed twice a day, 3 times a day, all day.
Yeah, it's partly to do, there's a few reasons, I guess. In the morning, they're getting baited water, so they get a little bit of nutrients from that. By baited water, we have warm water mixed with like a little bit of the meat that we feed, so the beef kibble, or sorry, the beef chicken. So they get a little bit in the morning, and then they're working throughout the day. So you don't want them to eat while they're working or training, because that will, like, they'll feel like an upset stomach. Kind of like, you know, if you had a big meal and then you went to the gym, like, you wouldn't feel very good. And then in the evening is when we feed them their once a day meal. And it also allows us to, we really watch because they're athletes, we really watch their calorie intake, and like there's a lot of monitoring on that. So we need to make sure that they, and it's all dog dependent, because some dogs have faster metabolisms than others. So you really watch your dogs and you feed them exactly what they need, and they get it in that one meal, and it's exactly what they need every day. And so, and another factor is time. Like, there's only so much time in the day. There's so many other chores to do as well. So once a day feed is just also time management.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. It's something we run into when we bring our students up north and they see the dogs being fed fish. There's like a whole fish for dinner. And it's foreign to our students, of course, and we do a lot of discussion around that and how that fish is, you know, incredibly nutritious. It's got all the nutrients, it's moisture, and those dogs are getting fed once a day. And my students come back saying, wow, they've got the healthiest coats and the best teeth. And one of the dangers that we worry about is people converting from that to poor quality dog food that's dry, doesn't have the moisture. And I think that's a really important point that as people providing services in the north, we have to be thinking about. So
100%.
Yeah, with old time trappers, you know, my dad, my uncles, they would introduce a new food, a new type of fish, and they really watch the dog's reaction, how he poops after the new food, how his energy level is, how is he acting after that? Like, does it give him this buffalo meat that, you know, all of the old trappers say, you gotta feed some buffalo meat because it just gives this dogs this extra power. They just become really powerful when they eat that red buffalo meat and that kind of yellow orange buffalo fat. It's just a different level of food for them. And so northern people have learned that. But the danger is more modern people not knowing the historical values of different foods and thinking that a bag of dry kibble, even a bag of dry kibble can come in such different qualities, from the cheap stuff at Walmart to, sometimes we're paying over $100 a bag for kibble. And just for people to understand that all of the food, it comes in different qualities, and you really have to watch the quality of the food that you're offering your animals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'll move on to another question here, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but how much strategy do you need to use in assembling a team? Can you put 8 dogs together who are good pullers, or do you have to balance styles and personalities?
Oh gosh, it's so much strategy, which is why I touched on like how that close connection you have with your dogs, knowing them so intimately, is so important. And I think it's what distinguishes the good mushers from the like not so good mushers, like the winning teams from the losing teams, is how intimately the dog musher knows their dogs. Because yeah, you need to know personalities. So certain personalities do better in lead. But like it's also the dog's physical abilities too. So like those two things that mesh together, if you have this exceptional lead dog, it's because physically they're able to run faster for longer distances, and they can keep this pace going for the rest of the team. But then they're also mentally, they're mentally strong, where they can push through difficult feelings, like feeling tired. They mentally can push through that. And then you have like certain dogs that can only go, they work better with other dogs side by side. Like they feed off of each other. So you need to keep that in mind. I mean, some dogs don't like another dog, so they'll fight if you stop. So you want to, you don't want that happening. What else? There's so much that goes into it. You have the wheel dogs on the back that are right next to the sled. Those are kind of like your big, strong, the muscle of the team. They keep the weight easier for the rest of the team moving forward. So you want dogs that, in that position, they have a certain running style where it's not jerky. It's like they can run quite smooth, so that the weight is continuously held by them for the rest of the team. Yeah, I guess that question is really I could go on for a whole other hour on that question.
It's fabulous. It's clearly not straightforward. And it takes a lot of understanding your dogs. Okay, we're going to sneak in a few more questions here, even though we're running late, because it's just so interesting. So we do have a couple comments. One just saying, where did it go? Lots of thank yous for sharing. A comment about, I wish all the animal rights people could watch this presentation. Your images took my breath away, and the bond you have with these dogs is obvious. You guys will love looking through these comments after. They're wonderful. Another, I thoroughly enjoyed this presentation and recall some of the stories from our elders about the connection and respect that there was for their dogs. I would be interested in learning more about reviving this unique relationship with dogs. So hopefully you and Chichu can get together afterwards and discuss that. There's a question around, are there any designations for mushers to distinguish good ones from the not so good ones? Can you be a certified professional musher? Is there some sort of designations that would recognize that?
There's a few organizations that are starting to work on that, where there's different designations where a representative from that organization comes and looks at the dog lot and can kind of like stamp them. A lot of that's in Alaska, so it kind of has yet to move over here. It's a lot of, I guess, self-policing with dog mushers, you know, like for us, like I get probably even more upset and more angry than any activist out there when I hear of like sled dogs or any dog being treated poorly, because like they're my family, and so I'm just like, I can't comprehend why someone else doesn't treat their dogs in that sort of way. But as for like formalization, it's hard because dog mushers are so busy just being dog mushers, so it's kind of hard to formalize things. And I think that's a big reason why there's not these formal institutions or organizations that are there for that reason.
Great. I think, okay, I'm just going to add one more question in there and then one of mine, but there's a question about, do you have any concerns about about the long races, like the Iditarod? Is that, do you see, are there any animal welfare issues there, or do you feel those are policed well enough?
Yeah, the long races, so you need to use the right dogs. And I think, because, you know, for us, I answered that question about like how our dogs, they don't look like Huskies because they are, they have these more hunting dogs bred into them. So because we run, our race is like sprint, like longer sprints. So around 30 to 50 miles is kind of what we run. And then, so we have a different breed of dog than what long distance mushers. So like the Iditarod mushers use different breeds of dogs. And I think just making sure that the right type of dog is being utilized in the different races. But I do know the Iditarod, like the organizers, like what Iditarod mushers have to do in order to get accepted to participate in that race is all about making sure that their dogs can handle it. And so they have it down. Like they know what they're doing. The dog welfare is first and foremost on their minds. And I think it, you know, the controversy and like the activism with these long races partly comes from people just not fully understanding it and not having a conversation with like the people involved with these races, because they know what they're doing.
And those races like that are very heavily scrutinized and monitored, so it eliminates any areas for abuse as well. I think you know, if they have veterinarians throughout all of these races, they're continually checking the health of the dogs in the race, and they're kind of the last line. I think most of the mushers, like Jordee said, these dogs are part of their family and part of just so important to them that they have that same attitude that we have, where the health of the dog is critical. And if you're and it's like old time people, if old time trappers abuse their sled dogs, they're not going to be able to travel very well. They're not going to be able to hunt like they should be hunting. They're not going to be able to trap the dogs. They're not going to have the energy. So if you're abusing your sled dogs, you're working against yourself and what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Great. Well, I'm probably going to get in trouble for letting us go over, but that's how it is, because I have the power. I want to thank you two so much. Like I say, I've had my students come up and you guys have provided them that just vital introduction before they go to the communities and meet the dogs in the communities and meet the community members, and have provided an amazing perspective. And I think when you look through and see the comments here from people all over the place, like it's been real eye-opener, and just a beautiful expression of what these dogs mean, of of the relationships, of the trust that you talked about that you have in the dog. And I think, Jordee, you said it too, is these are not pets. You don't own them. You work side by side with them. And I think, you know, that's such an important point, and it's something for a lot of people to get their minds around of how that works. So again, some of the words that people have used here is incredible, powerful, tribute, magical, amazing. So thank you so very much, and look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah, let's go, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
All right, I'll pass.